Normally, a muse is seen as exterior to one's self, and usually finds its place in one of two people. The most common duo is the artist and the muse, and while this relationship is as fascinating as it is fruitful, it poses some issues, especially if the muse is female. Throughout history, those who have assumed the role of the muse have been undermined of their own creative potential, their agency, or their intelligence. Such things happen all the time still. One specific instance would be that of the intellectual, psychoanalyst, and writer Andrea Salomé, whose relationships with prominent male figures eclipsed her own prolific body of work, and her beautiful theories are very scarcely translated. Salomé was considered a muse to many, Rilke and Nietzsche to name a few, but especially so by those who analyzed and documented history, who often sensationalized her vague personal life. However, she vehemently refused the muse title throughout her life, and refused any form of subordination to anyone, and instead found far more fulfillment within herself. It was Salomé who became deeply intrigued by the idea that we can find the muse within ourselves. One of her most impactful relationships was the one she had with Sigmund Freud, one of the few men who did not consider her a muse, but actually a close confidant in intellectual matters. At the time that Freud was beginning to study narcissism and self-love, Salomé would also take interest, only to be the first to give Narcissus a little bit more credit for his self-obsession.
The myth of Narcissus, as we all know, is the man who caught sight of his reflection in a pool of water. Entranced by his self-image, he drowns. In much of psychoanalysis, as well as psychology, narcissism is a negative mental disposition. In psychoanalysis, narcissism entails a subject's inability to distinguish themselves from their surroundings, the inability to find meaning in anything which does not resemble themselves. In psychology, such attitudes are taken to more tyrannical heights, through the need to be worshipped and lack of empathy for others. Selfishness taken to an extreme.
Despite this being the predominant conclusion about narcissism, Salomé came to her own conclusions about the myth of Narcissus. She believed that his self-obsession had a dual meaning. One could surely regress and lose themselves in the homogeny of their own perception, or it could be, as she wrote, the deepest entry into ourselves. What Narcissus sees in the water is a familiar place, long held within fragments of unconscious memory, a lost part of himself, which offers him an opportunity to access deeper, creative potential through which he can mature. This was the creative Narcissus, the Narcissus who gives birth to himself, Narcissus, the discoverer of himself, the self-knower. Jane Feldman further explores the direction of Salomé's thinking in her essay entitled Andrea Salomé, Seeking the Muse in the Pool of Narcissus. She writes, Salomé would continue to promote this one aspect of narcissism as an intuitive, deeply entrenched, life-affirming psychic energy that was always present, accompanying all levels of experience in which the self recognizes its reflection within a larger, natural, undifferentiated whole. She continues, expanding her views even further in the dual orientation of narcissism in 1921, Salomé would again insist that there was an aspect of Narcissus that was not fatally entangled in self-love, but had rather discovered an entry into the unconscious itself. Through this analysis, we come to see Narcissus as a combination of the artist and the muse, at once creator and created. The narcissist attempts at self-awareness and is dedicated to the pursuit of inner knowledge, rather than some kind of pathological ignorance. And it is my belief that inner knowledge can be sought in the exterior world through learning new skills and perfecting the ones that we've already got. Which is why I want to speak for a moment about this video's sponsor, Skillshare. I want to share something with you all from Chidera, who is more well known as the Slum Flower. She has a class that I feel is very pertinent to this conversation, and it's called Revolutionary Self-Care, Embrace, Nurture, and Grow Your Authentic Self. Chidera preaches something very similar to what I do, that all roads in life start with you and how you view yourself. In one of the classes, she said something I really liked, something like, when you know your worth, that teaches other people what your worth is. I thought that was pretty great. This is a class that's based on the importance of self-reflection and investigation and how that affects your future. And I think she does a really great job at dismissing this idea that mistakes are like fatal to us, especially when you're trying to like be who you are and express yourself. Sometimes we feel like when you do the wrong thing or you mess up, like you just want to run into a closet and hide, right? But she just talks about failures like they're successes or rewards, because you're always learning something, and then you're adding complexity to your personality in your life. I feel like for so much of our lives and our parents' lives and our parents' lives, we've been told to think about others before ourselves. And I think that method is folly. I feel like that separation from self leads to confusion and aimlessness and others taking advantage of the fact that you don't know who you are. And when I watch her class, it makes me happy to know that more and more people are realizing the value of getting to know yourself. And they're making that journey way less intimidating and more constructed. And she isn't the only talented person on Skillshare that's offering that kind of information. So if you aren't already familiar with the platform, Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives whose categories span art, photography, cinematography, design, business, and personal growth. And you can dip into skills because maybe you want to have a creative career or you want to have a business, but you can also do it just because you want to learn more about yourself. You want to explore your personal interests. I think any reason is a good reason to start learning something. So if you're thinking of giving Skillshare a try, the first 500 people to use my link in the description or the QR code provided will receive 20% off their first year at Skillshare. And there's a 7-day free trial and a 30-day money-back guarantee if it's just not for you. But I would definitely consider giving it a chance. So whenever the creative narcissist, as Salomé puts it, plunges into the pool of water, he is in search of a part of himself which he requires to feel whole. Perhaps he is trying to access a memory of a more completed self from the depths. Either way, I find it fascinating that narcissists only requires himself for this endeavor. And so whenever Narcissus reaches a level of familiarity with his reflection, he has found a muse in himself. The artist and muse relationship, if it, let's say, is mistakenly represented by two separate entities, could actually be a single being hoping to unite with the other half of itself that they have lost. And here poses the problem with the common artist-muse relationship whenever it's two people. When the artist only extracts the matter which is allegiant to them from their muse, the muse ceases to be their own person, right? So you have objectification and you have control, and like whenever the muse starts to act out of character, the artist leaves them or becomes very upset with them or just diminishes them, whatever it may be. That seems to be where that break happens. According to Feldman and Salomé, this is the masculine approach to inner knowledge, and this is fascinating. So I'm paraphrasing here. The creative male psyche seeks inner knowledge by externalizing it in the form of another person, whereas the creative female psyche does not require externalization and is more comfortable with seeking completion from within. What? The narcissistic way is internal, making it concerned with femininity. And of course, it's no coincidence that Venus is often depicted holding a mirror. Venus, too, in mythology is self-contained and self-knowing, is she not? Now, we need to talk about the mirror. The mirror as an object of symbolism deserves its own moment here. It's extremely important. Like I said, both Venus and Narcissus are depicted with their form of reflections, right? The man-made mirror that Venus holds is not just a mirror, but it is equally the representation of the lake in which Narcissus is looking at his reflection. The mirror is the lake. But what is the lake? What does the lake symbolize? Salomé proposes this to be the unconscious, and there is mythology to back that up. If you've ever heard of the name Mnemosyne, who was the goddess of memory, became the mother of the 9 Muses in Greek mythology. In another essay from the same Jungian journal I have been reading and have been quoting throughout this video, Patricia Reis says of Mnemosyne, without her there would be no art, theater, neither tragedy nor comedy, no music, dance, poetry, hymns, no history or sciences of astronomy. And what does that mean? Without memory, there is no creation, because creation in art requires reflection. Literally. When you reflect on what you're doing, you're standing still, so to speak. When you are forgetting, you are in constant movement, which makes a whole lot of sense when you realize that Mnemosyne's opposite is Lethe, who is the goddess of forgetting. And what do you think is used to symbolize her? A river. A river. Lethe is the river in the underworld. Again, to stand still is to remember. To remember is to create art out of life and to contemplate. So when Narcissus looks at his reflection, plunges into it, he is thirsting for memory because he's looking at a lake, a standing body of water. And again, in Feldman's essay, she notes, what Narcissus sees in his reflection, Salomé considers to be the memory trace of an undifferentiated existence, a unified harmony of self. To unify oneself is to find the other half in the reflection. But the major difference here is this. The narcissism that we're all familiar with generally is just me, more of the same, the reflection of us. But the reflection Salomé is talking about is us, but this like mysterious other us. It looks like us, but it's the half that we don't know yet. A familiar face looking back at us is merely a lure to plunge us into the rest of the lake. And what we discover under the surface is memory. I've been reading Camus' Myth of Sisyphus, and there is a quote in there that I swear I heard this in the audiobook for it, but I cannot for the life of me find it when I search for it. You know, like I do like a Control F and I try and search the words from this quote, but I know I heard it. Tell me if I am wrong, but he says something like, all man learns in his endeavors is that he is recalling a memory. Okay? This is where we go deep. I feel that fits perfectly here because in the pursuit of ourselves and simultaneously the pursuit of our muse, right? We find that we're discovering things we already knew. I know that sounds ludicrous, but like really that's how it feels and that's what it is. When you're figuring out who you are, I hope this makes sense. When you're figuring out who you are remembering a more completed self of you. So this completed version that you're remembering predates who you are right now. And that makes sense because the Greeks thought there was like this elevated space where perfected forms of things existed, right? And I feel like many of us have heard this phrase that our lives are just basically trying to find our way back home. What is home? Something familiar, right? But why is it familiar? Why did it ever feel familiar in the first place if you don't even know what this home is or what it looks like, but you somehow know you're getting there? Like, it's the same thing with figuring out who you are. It's like coming home. The muse is someone familiar, like a hint, showing us the way back to ourselves. It's not just a vanity thing. To be your own muse is the desire to go home and to have the strength to hold your hand, to hold your own hand on the way back there. The other way, right, that I mentioned, the masculine way, is to have somebody else hold your hand on that way, on that journey back, like a lover. Though I said before that the masculine direction of like externalizing the muse has caused harm through the artist's inability to reconcile the muse with the person, the tale of Narcissus, as seen as the expression of the perils of vanity, is clearly a cautionary tale to those who seek inner knowledge, who have good intentions, but remain superficial instead. There's a caveat to both sides, and with the increasingly narcissistic culture exhibited today, where people attempt at self-expression and end up landing in vanity, that message is more important than ever. I think it's good that people are trying to figure themselves out and they're trying to have boundaries and they're trying to put themselves first more than they have in the past. I think that's a great thing. But that I've seen how that degrades, and that incentive needs to go beyond what outfit is popular on TikTok and bailing out on plans last minute. Salomé's theories about narcissism really changed how I viewed selfishness. But I know it's dangerous territory, 100%. To be one's own muse is not only a difficult enterprise because of the risk of vanity, but also the risk of going too deep within yourself. You end up like locking yourself away, or you may not like what you find there. Nietzsche didn't like what he found. Rilke didn't like what he found. Rilke was like a lover of Salomé, and his inner muse was an angel that sought to destroy him, or disdained to destroy him. Didn't even care about who he was. But I don't know. I'd take that risk. I want to see that. I want to see if in my lifetime I can come into communion with that other me and be wiser for it. They say that the muses came as whispers in the ears of those who invoked them. And I feel like I can hear those whispers. I mean, they're intuitions, but it was only recently that I realized that the whispers do not originate from the mouth of someone else. It is me that whispers.